On the broadcast tonight, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's nuclear pursuit will hasten collapse of that regime, warned South Korean President Park in a televised speech from Parliament. The U.S.'s F-22 stealth fighter jets will take the South Korean skies tomorrow as part of Washington's efforts to intensify its strategic assets in South Korea. And Beijing makes clear that it strongly opposes the use of a sophisticated U.S. anti-missile defense system on the Korean peninsula. NEWSCENTER begins right now. Good evening to our viewers in Korea. Hello to those around the world. This is Arirang News Center. We're going to dedicate a significant portion of the News Center tonight on President Park Geun-hye's address to the nation in Parliament. In a largely unusual move, the South Korean leader invited herself to the assembly floor for a special speech. She spent a good portion of her address calling for unity of the South Korean people in the wake of North Korea's latest provocations. North Korea got the most mention during her half-an-hour speech, followed by the people, which she vowed to safeguard, but nowhere to be seen or heard was the word dialogue. First, here's our top office correspondent, Song Ji-sun.
President Park said she has made a consistent effort to bring about change in North Korea in order to realize her vision for unification. In return, she said Pyongyang has responded only with aggression with its nuclear test last month and long-range missile launch just a month later. Saying that the Kim Jong-un regime is on a reckless run without brakes, she said North Korea has the potential to deploy a nuclear-tipped missile if there is no change in the current approach.
국민 여러분, 이제 기존의 방식과 선의로는 북한 정권의 핵 개발 의지를 결코 꺾을 수 없고 북한의 핵 능력만 고도화시켜서 결국 한반도의 파국을 초래하게 될 것이라는 점이 명백해졌습니다. 이제 더 이상 북한의 기만과 위협에 끌려다닐 수는 없으며 과거처럼 북한의 도발에 굴복하여 퍼주기식 지원을 하는 일도 더 이상 해서는 안 될 일이라 생각합니다.
The president also said South Korea should be more proactive in working toward the goal of reigning in the north, making reference to her recent decision to close a jointly run factory park.
개성공단 전면 중단은 앞으로 우리가 국제사회와 함께 취해 나갈 재반 조치의 시작에 불과합니다. 지금부터 정부는 북한 정권이 핵 개발로는 생존할 수 없으며 오히려 체제 붕괴를 재촉할 뿐이라는 사실을 뼈저리게 깨닫고 스스로 변화할 수밖에 없는 환경을 만들기 위해 보다 강력하고 실효적인 조치들을 취해 나갈 것입니다.
President Park explained that the safety of the South Korean people was her first priority in deciding to close the complex. She said Seoul and Washington's recent announcement of talks on deploying the U.S.-led anti-ballistic missile system known as THAAD was also made with that priority in mind.
President Park has shifted away from her trust-building process as distrust has prevailed between the two Koreas over the past 3 years. The most important task for the administration now is managing the situation on the Korean peninsula in a stable manner so that inter-Korean tensions do not get worse.
Calling on both lawmakers and the public to unite, President Park said the nation cannot survive if division stems from within, and there should be neither rivals nor internal aggression when the nation is facing a common crisis of national security. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
Also taking up a significant proportion of the president's address today was the economy. Now, in doing so, she also called on the nation's lawmakers to make national interest their priority and swiftly pass a number of key bills which directly affect the lives of the Korean people. Our Shin Se-min has this next report.
President Park Geun-hye called on the country and lawmakers to support her economic revitalization initiatives in her parliamentary address on Tuesday, pressing lawmakers for quick passage of a set of related bills. She also called on them to abide by their constitutional duty to prioritize the national interest.
서민들의 살림살이를 나아지게 하겠다고 약속하셨고 각 지역을 발전시키겠다고 약속하셨던 그 말대로 경제 활성화와 민생 법안을 지체 없이 통과시켜 주실 것을 거듭 부탁드립니다.
The president pointed to a bill on the service sector that's been stalled for over 3.5 years and said fostering the sector is not a matter of choice, but one of survival. She added the sector is capable of creating some 690,000 jobs in areas such as finance, education, and culture, which is double the number of jobs that can be created from the manufacturing industry. She also urged lawmakers to pass a package of bills on labor reform, which she said will give young Koreans more opportunities, protect workers, and improve working conditions. In line with the president's call to duty, the Parliamentary Judiciary Committee has screened a number of bills on Tuesday, with the hope of putting them up for a vote by the full assembly on Friday. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Well, as usual, Korea's rival political parties remain split on which parts of the president's speech they agreed or disagreed on. Our senior parliamentary correspondent Kim Young-gil has the immediate reactions across the political aisle.
The ruling Saenuri Party praised President Park Geun-hye's parliamentary address for its strong warning to North Korea and her message of national unity for the South Korean people. The party also echoed the president's call to the parliament to do its job and pass pending bills.
Now it's time for the National Assembly to act. We must stop the parliamentary paralysis and send out hope to the people by passing key bills. Winning elections must not be our priority. Our priority should be ensuring the safety of the nation and the people.
The spokesperson said when it comes to national security, there cannot be any division between political parties, and he urged lawmakers to pass a pending counterterrorism bill and a bill on North Korea human rights. The counterterrorism legislation has been stalled due to a conflict over whether the National Intelligence Service should be allowed to investigate terrorist activity, based on concerns about the potential for an abuse of power. Lawmakers had agreed to pass their North Korea human rights bill last month, but negotiations fell apart at the 11th hour over the way the bill was worded. The main opposition Minju Party of Korea criticized President Park for closing the Kaesong industrial complex without much consultation.
President Park Geun-hye shut down the Kaesong industrial complex as if she were conducting a military exercise. She didn't even tell the South Korean businesses on her sudden plans. If she had been more careful, they would have suffered fewer damages.
Lee said the suspension of the industrial park will result in a combined loss of at least $870 million for the South Korean firms with factories there. He added that government measures alone will not be enough to make up for the heavy losses the companies are expected to incur. The rival parties still have a long way to go before they'll be able to reach a compromise on the key bills the president mentioned in her address, including the counterterrorism bill and the one on North Korea's human rights. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
So how do experts feel about President Park's televised address? Well, we spoke to one earlier today to get an analysis and insight into whether the president's message resonated with the Korean people. Kim Ji-yeon has more.
Decent, timely, and appropriate. These were the words Kim Jae-ton, professor of international studies at Seoul University, used to describe President Park Geun-hye's address to the National Assembly. He says her speech adequately counters recent criticisms that the South Korean government was out of line or acting emotionally when it suspended the Kaesong industrial complex or announced official talks on the deployment of a U.S. lab missile defense system to the peninsula.
By suspending suspending operations at Kaesong, we could send a strong message to the international community that we are willing to do illicit cooperation from the international community. So I think it was the right time for President Park to step up and to explain to South Korean population public why it was necessary to suspend operations at Kaesong.
The professor also believes South Korea is warning Pyongyang that its bad behavior will not be condoned. Although President Park's speech is viewed as an address to the Korean public, Professor Kim Jae-chun thinks using the National Assembly was a strategic move to pressure lawmakers to pass not only counterterrorism and North Korea-related bills, but also those on labor reforms and economic revitalization.
Crises like this, the National Assembly and political leaders will have to take the lead. But instead, they are being the source of gridlock. She's saying to the National Assembly, you got to focus on your traditional mission and pass these pending bills. You are the ones who have to step up, make them stand behind the national leader. And that is the strong message that she wants to impart to the National Assembly and political leaders as well.
Kim Jeon, Arirang News.
U.S.'s sophisticated stealth jets will fly the South Korean skies tomorrow as Washington continues to send its strategic assets to the Korean peninsula following North Korea's nuclear and long-range missile tests in the last couple of weeks. Connie Kim has more on efforts being made by the two allies to boost and show their rock-hard alliance.
4 F-22 stealth fighter jets will fly into South Korea on Wednesday as part of a show of force by the United States in response to North Korea's continued provocations on the peninsula. South Korean military officials said Tuesday the jets will depart from the U.S. and make their way to Osan Air Base in Pyeongtaek, Gyeonggi-do Province. The F-22 is one of a few radar-evading planes with an operational range of over 2,000 kilometers, making it capable of attacking the office of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un without being detected. This will be Washington's third deployment of strategic assets to the south. A B-52 bomber capable of hitting underground facilities in North Korea flew over South Korea last month following the North's nuclear test. The nuclear-powered submarine USS North Carolina came into Busan port Tuesday morning after taking part in a 3-day South Korea-U.S. military drill in the EC. And when the annual Key Resolve and Full Legal Joint Military Exercises kick off next month, the swift dispatch of the U.S. forces and strategic assets to South Korea will be the focus of the drills. The Defense Ministry said the exercise will be like no other.
The joint military drills will be held on a larger scale, becoming the biggest ever.
An additional 5,700 U.S. troops and 45 more combat planes will be taking part in the drills, along with the nuclear-powered aircraft carrier USS John C. Stennis strike group. The pressure on North Korea is expected to peak when the 4 strategic weapons are deployed to South Korea in the coming weeks. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Vice ministers of South Korea and China met in Seoul today for strategic talks to discuss ways to deal with North Korea's latest provocations. But the two countries do not see eye to eye on a possible deployment of U.S.'s sophisticated missile defense system on the Korean peninsula. In fact, Beijing's vice minister made clear that China stands firmly opposed to the idea. Kwon So-ah reports from the nation's Foreign Affairs Ministry.
South Korea-China relations have never been better. That's what South Korea's Vice Foreign Minister Im Seong-nam and his Chinese counterpart Zhang Ye-sui agreed on during the first bilateral strategic meeting between the two sides in almost 3 years. But the main focus on Tuesday were measures that should be taken against North Korea's latest provocations. That includes talks on the deployment of a U.S. THAAD missile defense system to South Korea, which an official at Seoul's foreign ministry said was brought up first by the Chinese side.
We exchanged opinions on the THAAD system. China has expressed opposition to its deployment. We hope that related countries take cautious action.
With Korea, of course, being one of those countries, concerns have been raised over the possibility of THAAD influencing bilateral relations.
The THAAD issue is just one possible dilemma in further improving South Korea-China relations. China might be stating its opposition sternly, but it's unlikely to take any retaliatory measures against the THAAD system.
According to officials, talks on the adoption of a new UN Security Council resolution against Pyongyang were also high on the agenda. Sources from the UN and China are saying there has been made significant progress on that front, but Seoul's foreign ministry has not yet given an update on that.
All I can say is that there is movement, but we cannot make predictions about the specific timing of an adoption on a resolution.
There have been suggestions, though, that China and the U.S. appear to be closer to narrowing their differences.
I think it unlikely that China wants to be seen by the international community as the protector of North Korea. I expect that they will indeed come on board with significant new sanctions, and we're working towards that end.
In 2012, it took 41 days for the UN Security Council to punish the North for its missile launch, which makes the process this time around the longest yet. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Amid rising security threats on the Korean Peninsula and heightening tensions in Northeast Asia, high-level officials of South Korea and the U.S. will meet for strategic talks later this week. Now, Seoul's National Security Council Deputy Chief Cho Tae-yong will fly to Washington Wednesday to sit down with U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Antony Blinken. The two allies are expected to discuss imposing stronger, more effective sanctions on Pyongyang. The talks follow an agreement reached during President Park Geun-hye's visit to the U.S. last year aimed at strengthening their strategic alliance. Meanwhile, U.S. President Barack Obama is hosting a summit with leaders of Southeast Asian nations in California. The gathering is seen as a chance for Washington to reassert its economic and political influence in the region in the face of a rising China. As our Kwon Jang-ho reports, that also includes rallying cooperation against a threatening North Korea.
At the plush resort of Sunnylands, California, U.S. President Barack Obama is hosting a summit with 10 leaders from the ASEAN bloc. Over the next 2 days, he'll be looking to reassert the U.S.'s presence in the Southeast Asian region in response to China's growing military and economic influence. The leading topic of discussion will be the maritime disputes in the South China Sea. China has been building artificial islands there over the last few years, angering neighboring countries by infringing on their sea borders. The U.S. is hoping for a joint show of force to rein in Beijing's territorial ambitions.
Here at this summit, we can advance our shared vision of a regional order where international rules and norms, including freedom of navigation, are upheld and where disputes are resolved through peaceful legal means.
The Trans-Pacific Partnership deal will also be high on the agenda. 4 of the nations attending are already signed up to the Free Trade Pact that includes Japan and Australia, but more are interested in joining. The Obama administration views the TPP as a key way to gain more economic ties in the region to compete against China. The North Korean issue will also be on the table. Obama is expected to rally further support for international sanctions against the regime in light of lukewarm cooperation from China and Russia. China, a key ally of North Korea, has said it's committed to denuclearizing the North, but has not been able to agree with the US or the UN on how to achieve that goal. Kwon Jang-ho, Arirang News.
We've been bringing you reports from Asia's largest annual multinational military drills in Thailand. The Cobra Gold exercise aims to enhance interoperability among the 27 participating nations. Now, that includes South Korea and the U.S., but it also serves another purpose: to lend a helping hand to those in need. This is our Kim Hyun-bin's final installment of his 3-part series from Thailand.
A group of South Korea's finest Navy and Marine Corps members is in Thailand to participate in Cobra Gold, the Asia-Pacific region's largest multinational military exercise. But there is another key aspect of the annual drills that doesn't involve combat. The South Korean military has engaged in civil military operations since joining the exercises in 2010, building schools, hospitals, and other infrastructure around the country. For this year's humanitarian aid project, Korean soldiers in the Navy and Marines are building a school library and offering Korean language classes to students free of charge.
My student very exciting for activity from Navy Korea. I want to say thank you again.
And so far, working with the ROK Navy and Marine Corps has been a really great experience. Really impressed with their professionalism and the skills and different things that they bring to it. And
through his service, the Korean military is also repaying an old debt from roughly 65 years ago.
Thailand was the first country in Asia to send its combat forces to South Korea during the Korean War. To show our gratitude, our troops who are taking part in Cobra Gold are conducting numerous civil-military operations, including building elementary schools to better promote our friendly ties.
In another town, a group of soldiers from South Korea, the U.S., and Thailand visited a school for children with autism, where they spent time with the kids and gave them gifts.
I'm very happy to see South Korea, Thailand, and the U.S. volunteering together here at the school for children with autism. Usually only Thai people come and help. I'm touched that everyone came.
Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News, Satay, Thailand.
Now, in economy, Korea's central bank has held its key rate steady at 1.5%, continuing its wait-and-see approach as it faces increasing external risks and a gloomy market at home. Hwang Ji-hye has more.
Despite mounting pressure to prop up the economy by lowering the key rate, the Bank of Korea kept its rate steady for an 8th straight month in February. While the top central banker did admit that there is room for an additional rate cut, he was skeptical about the effects it could bring.
Adjusting the key rate always brings with it expectations and side effects. But given the current conditions, there are too many external uncertainties that put in question the effect it would have. But the side effects, on the other hand, can be sufficiently predicted.
In fact, amid a global slowdown, Japan's aggressive monetary easing is under fire for not bearing fruit as the government might have hoped, at least for now, instead leading to a stronger yen and a jittery market. Still, Korea's sluggish domestic demand, coupled with plummeting exports, the country's traditional growth engine, stand as major sticking points for the central bank. Due to these concerns, the government introduced a new set of stimulus measures last month, and experts say the BOK is likely to join the accommodative monetary trend down the road.
In the second half, we think the fiscal effects will run out, and if there are no major improvement in the global economy, the BOK will eventually need to make further easing move. We expect 2 more rate cuts in the second half of this year.
Weighing down less on the BOK is also a hint from the Federal Reserve Chair Janet Yellen that the U.S. may not be as inclined to hike rates, giving Korea more room to trim its own. And with one of the monetary policymakers arguing for a rate cut in this month's meeting, some analysts are even expecting a trim in the key rate as early as next month. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
The Bank of Japan stunned global markets with its surprise announcement of a negative interest rate last month. Well, that change took effect today, and the central bank is hoping that the move will help beat deflation and boost local consumption. But will it actually bring desired effects? Kim Min-ji has this report.
Japan has entered an era of negative interest rates. The Bank of Japan announced a policy late last month, but it officially took effect on Tuesday. A minus 0.1% interest rate will now be applied to some of the accounts commercial banks hold with the central bank. The move, which was pioneered by central banks in Europe, is seen as a means to push down borrowing costs in hopes that people would spend more, save less, and stimulate inflation. Around 10 trillion yen, or roughly $90 billion in bank funds are subject to the negative rate, which makes up about 4% of the total funds held by the central bank. The change comes at a time when Japan has long suffered from deflationary pressures, pushing the central bank to take aggressive stimulus measures in recent years. Adding to concerns, its GDP shrank 1.4% on year in the fourth quarter. Worries about a slowdown in China and other emerging markets are also weighing heavy on Japan, which has been struggling with market volatility and an appreciation of the yen against the dollar. So it remains to be seen just how effective this latest measure will be.
The global economy is facing a downturn, and unlike when Abenomics was first implemented, the yen is not weakening as it once. The move will not be able to revitalize the real economy, although it may lift up the real estate market.
The Bank of Japan has left the door open for rates to fall further into negative territory. But some analysts point out that more drops won't necessarily have the same impact as the first cut. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Russia and other major crude producers have agreed to freeze output to drive up oil prices, though the deal hinges on the participation of other major exporters. Bruce Harrison joins me live in the studio. Bruce, this is seen as the first major action after a year and a half of super low oil prices. I mean, we saw including a 10-year low of the crude falling below $30 a barrel.
That's right, at one point below $30, Kanyang. So what we had today was Russia, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Venezuela meeting in Doha, Qatar, and they all agreed to freeze output at January levels, but that's only if producers adopt the proposal. Some leading producers like Russia and Saudi Arabia, the two largest in the world, are looking at their budgets and the hit they've taken from low prices, while other producers are more concerned about expanding their market share that they've been able to do amid the low prices that have continued for such a long time now.
So Bruce, tell me, what needs to happen for the freeze to take place, really, and how is that going to impact the oil market?
It's unclear right now how many major producers, need to be on board for this deal to go through. The four countries who met in Qatar said the group's their next steps would be discussed in coming months. Iran is one of the nations they're planning to talk to because Tehran wants to improve its market share further now that international sanctions have been lifted following the implementation of the U.S. broker deal on its nuclear program. Right now, it plans to keep increasing its supply, which would run counter to the proposed freeze by the group today.
It is very important to get a fair price to sustain the level of investment that is required to sustain the production.
Oil prices rose to $35 a barrel after news of today's meeting, but later fell to $34 as expectations for a deal quickly faded. The United Nations and residents in Syrian towns say around 50 civilians were killed when missiles struck medical centers and schools in rebel-held towns. A medic and two residents in the Syrian town of Azaz said at least 14 civilians were killed there. Missiles reportedly hit a children's hospital and a school sheltering refugees fleeing from the advancing Syrian army. In a separate incident, medical charity Doctors Without Borders said at least 7 staff were killed and at least 8 others are missing after missiles hit a hospital in the province of Idlib.
It's clearly an attack against the medical mission. To be today a doctor or a nurse in the areas controlled by the opposition, it's equal to be a criminal.
The attacks come days after the U.S. and Russia brokered a temporary ceasefire in Syria that's expected to take effect at the end of the week.
And on a different note, the 2016 Grammys was a night of old and new winners, performances to remember musicians who really paved the way for those on stage Monday night.
Sure, and kind of an upset, too. Rapper Kendrick Lamar had 11 nominations going to the night. He won 5 awards, but none of the big ones. Taylor Swift captured the big prize of the night. She became the first woman to win a Best Album twice and had a message for other women on stage.
If you just focus on the work and you don't let those people sidetrack you, someday when you get where you're going, you'll look around and you will know that it was you and the people who love you who put you there.
And there were the tributes. Grammy Award winner Lady Gaga paid tribute to David Bowie, recreating the late singer's famous androgynous look, and the Eagles played in memory of their guitarist, Glenn Frey.
So, Bruce, Justin Bieber won his first Grammys ever.
That's correct. He was one of the first-time winners, I believe, for Best Dance Recording. You also had British artist Ed Sheeran and then American artist Meghan Trainor, who had that song all about that bass. The music video was full of bright pastel colors and kind of a tune about respecting your body and being who you are.
Being who you are. Well, another thing that I learned from Grammys is that even Adele can have a little bit of an off night.
Yeah, I saw that as well. So even someone as quality as Adele, maybe it's just happens.
Yep, technical issues. All right, Bruce, thank you so much for today.
Take care, my partner.
My, it was one snowy day here in Seoul. It snowed on and off all day long, but a lot of snow at one time. For more on this and the latest weather update, let's go over to our Jihan. Jihan.
Hello, Kanyang. It did feel like midwinter again with a heavy snow advisory in place in some parts of the country this morning, and slippery roads caused traffic chaos in many parts of the country.
Right. I mean, it did come down heavy at one time, but it seems like most of the snow has let up, at least here in the nation's capital.
That is right. Most of the wet clouds that were dropping snow over the peninsula have moved out by now. And that means tomorrow morning we'll wake up to dry and sunny conditions across the nations. Skies will be clear, but temperatures are not going to drop. We'll see a return to seasonal norms by tomorrow afternoon, but morning lows will be as cold as today, so let's take a closer look. Daily low here in Seoul will kick off at -6 degrees Celsius, -4 for Daegu, and Busan will start out the day at -2 degrees Celsius. And as for the daily highs, the capital will top out at 2, 5 for Daegu, and Busan will top out at 7 tomorrow afternoon. Another bout of rain is in the forecast for Thursday afternoon, but it seems like temperatures will be hovering near the seasonal averages throughout the week, so it seems like we'll have to wait till March before spring conditions set in. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the weather conditions around the world.
And that is our broadcast on this Tuesday night. I'm Moon Gun-young. Thank you for watching. We hope to see you right back here, same time tomorrow on NewsCenter.